Dave and I had been wed for about 4 years when we decided it was time to enlarge our small family. I met Dave at a deposition at the health insurance firm where I was employed, and he was the chief plaintiff's lawyer, while I was one of 6 defending a delicate position. Dave was, and continues to be, a gifted attorney ready for a lucrative partnership, poised to earn millions in the struggle for justice. Although I am a capable attorney, I wouldn't consider myself in his league, and was thus surprised when he contacted me shortly after the case was resolved. However, what he sought was not my legal expertise, but something more intimate. Through numerous dinners, drinks, dancing, and social events, I found out he was a witty and charming talker. The intimacy was all we could hope for Dave as a creative and attentive partner, and I was graced with a fiery and responsive physique. Then came the wedding, and we moved into one of those prevalent gated communities that proliferate across Long Island for the affluent, at least those with some wealth. We bought a 4-bedroom ranch that was too small for the price and too large for just the 2 of us, but it gave us space to grow and room for an au pair in case I chose to return to work. Like many fortunate couples, we were living the American dream with more wealth than a young couple might expect, and at times the only issue we faced was Dave's long working hours. While we are both lawyers, my role is more of a regular 9-to-5 office position, whereas he spends considerable time chasing a significant partnership. Consequently, I often found myself alone at the endless meetings. Barbecues, dinners, wine tastings, and neighborhood events that come with life in a gated community. It was through these gatherings that I befriended Johanna and, by extension, her husband Walter. This couple piqued my interest, and since I had leisure time in the final month of my pregnancy and was on vacation, I decided to learn everything I could. No, I didn't employ a private investigator or intrude into their private affairs. I merely cultivated a friendship with Johanna. Since she doesn't work and lives just 2 doors away from us, I was intrigued but not obsessively. There was a mystery, but it wasn't one that I felt compelled to unravel. Walter, to my knowledge, is a certified auditor with his own modest firm. It's unusual, but unlike other entrepreneurs, he never seeks out new clients or attempts to network. He appears like an accountant in his 40s, balding with a slight paunch, but not overweight. He doesn't resemble an athlete, but more of a scholarly, nerdy type, around 5 feet 3 inches tall, and often carries a somewhat distant or perplexed air. He never seems to quite gel with the other men, doesn't play golf, doesn't fish, doesn't drink, and doesn't fit the typical alpha male mold that pervades our community. Moreover, peculiarly for a married man, he is somewhat reserved when interacting with women, always polite, always a gentleman, but without any showiness. He mostly blends in with those around him. Joanna, on the other hand, is strikingly beautiful, vibrant, lively, and flirtatious, around 30 years old, but appears younger. She is utterly devoted to Walter and possesses a smile that could rival the Mona Lisa's, a figure, despite having 2 children, that I could never match, with breasts the size of small pineapples, possibly enhanced, and a mysterious allure that simply exudes sexuality. I've only seen her angry twice, once when some men mocked Walter in her presence, and she sharply scolded them, making them retreat with their tails between their legs, and another time when a local ladies' man tried to corner her with his antics. I believe he was relieved that his testicles were intact, but she expressed loudly and clearly that if he or anyone else attempted such actions, they would not escape consequence. What she possesses is solely for Walter and no one else. She has an evident, sometimes overwhelming admiration for Walter, and it's clear to everyone except, curiously, Walter himself, who appears unaware of it all. He obviously adores her, treats her wonderfully and with respect, and seems completely devoted to her. Yet he's dull enough to overlook the signs that everyone else notices. Or perhaps, having lived with it for so long, he has come to see it as normal. Like I mentioned, they live just 2 doors down from here, so they have the means to afford this area, but they don't flaunt the luxury items that are common in the rest of the neighborhood. Their cars lack flair, nothing extravagant. There are no boats in the yard, no 6-foot televisions, no man caves with mahogany bars that others in the area show off. They maintain a nice yard with a pool and a standard barbecue grill, like most homes here, but nothing ostentatious. I've never heard her complain about lacking money, nor is she caught up in the latest fashion trends. She wears minimal jewelry, a simple but elegant wedding band, a gold wedding ring, and plain gold earrings shaped like small cylinders. I suspect they have money for luxuries, but they choose not to display their wealth ostentatiously. They have 2 children, a 6-year-old son and a 2-year-old daughter, both well-mannered little beings, well cared for by their parents, and a Latina girl who acts as both maid and nanny, as well as by Joan, who is a stay-at-home mom. Even in this respect, they are completely ordinary. As I understand, my son attends one of the best private schools in the area, yet it's nothing extraordinary since he is only 6 years old. Mum takes him to school and picks him up afterward, while his father is at work, and the nanny cares for the baby. By that time I was 8 months pregnant and had taken leave from work. I was accustomed to walking every morning for exercise, staying close to the house, so I went out early. When I saw Joan dropping her son at school, we chatted for a bit, and I invited her to have coffee with me after she returned home. She had a busy morning planned, taking her son to school, going to the gym, then shopping, but she promised to come by around lunchtime for coffee and conversation. I sensed there was some story between them, just waiting to be revealed, but I didn't expect to learn it that day. I was mistaken. Joanna arrived a bit late. We sat drinking coffee and chatting about pregnancy and children in general when I asked her if she planned to have more children. It all depends on Walter as he decides, so it will be. If he wants more, we will have more. If not, then no. I noticed that as she spoke, she was fiddling with her small gold earring, a nervous habit I had seen several times when she discussed Walter. But you also have your own views on this, right? Because this isn't the 19th century. He can't compel you to get pregnant. No, Walter would never do that. He's a very kind man, and I couldn't have hoped for a better husband. It's not that he forces me to do anything, it's just that I'm willing to do anything to make him happy, including having children or not, and whatever else he desires. You really adore him that much, don't you? We all see how you treat him, as if he's a divine gift to women, and you've won the ultimate prize. That's how you regard him. Honestly, I've never seen anything like it until I met you two. And yet, sometimes he seems quite clueless about what you do for him. I hope he never realizes, she said, twirling the earring again. I scrutinized her more closely because her remark was peculiar. You don't want him to understand how much you care for him. It's difficult to clarify, but let me pose a question to you, Roberta. You are an attorney, and if I share something with you, can you keep it confidential? Like the client-lawyer confidentiality that's always discussed. I can if you engage my services. Are you experiencing any problems? Is Walter hurting or threatening you? No, nothing of that sort. I just have a tale that I'd like to share with someone just in case, but it must absolutely never recur. What does it take to hire you? It's quite straightforward. Just pay me something like $10 as a retainer, and we'll establish a verbal contract for attorney-client privilege. She dug into her purse, handed me a $20 bill, and smiled. Consider yourself hired. She began. I grew up on Long Island, but not in this part of it. My father was a roofer who squandered half of his earnings in bars, so we were never flush with cash. My mother worked as a hairstylist and brought home just enough, but we were certainly in the lower tier of the middle class, unlike in this neighborhood. Considering his drinking and philandering and their constant quarreling, it's a wonder I even graduated high school. Nonetheless, I managed to enroll in a secretarial school. When I met Walter, I was employed at a temp agency, which meant I was doing short-term jobs. His secretary was going on maternity leave and her assistant stepped in for her, so they hired me to fill in. I was essentially the backup. That was around 10 years ago. I was 24, already weary of the social scene, and began seriously considering settling down. I'll admit, I harbored somewhat self-centered thoughts of securing a wealthy husband for a few years and then moving on with a sizable fortune. Walter seemed to perfectly fit this mold. He was 32, 8 years my senior, and even more naive and inexperienced than he is now. I didn't view him as wealthier, but he owned his business and a nice apartment in a respectable part of the city, making him an ideal starter husband. After my stint at his office, we started dating, and I moved in with him. About a year later, we were married. Walter was kind and laid back, and I thought he'd be easy to manage for as long as necessary. He was also utterly trusting and never brought up a prenuptial agreement. I'm not proud of being somewhat of a gold digger, but I won't gloss over it either. And here you are, 10 years later, still happily married. Yes, indeed. Our engagement was quite ordinary. The sole condition for our marriage was that I wanted a proper home, one that we could truly call our own. Throughout my life, I'd always lived in rented flats. We searched and finally chose the one we now live in. I thought it was a bit large, but Walter wanted enough room for children, and although I had no initial plans for kids, I didn't want to disappoint him before the wedding. Fortunately, he didn't even flinch when he found out the price and added me to the deed effortlessly. However, shortly before the wedding, an incident occurred which I initially dismissed as inconsequential, but later I realized it might have been the most significant event of my life. And what was that? A few weeks after we got engaged, Walter suggested we have dinner with an old high school friend of his. We went to a small yet upscale restaurant in Little Italy, one of those family-run places. When we entered, there was an odd sensation, as if we had walked into someone's private space. Not a public venue, and we were not particularly welcome there. But Walter exchanged a few words with the head waiter, informed him of who we were expecting, and suddenly everything shifted. We were escorted to the premier table, and within minutes, the owner approached us with a complimentary bottle of top-tier wine. After that, the service was outstanding. 2 waiters were always nearby, responding to our needs almost before we could signal them. We had nearly finished our meal, and Walter's friend had not yet arrived when 2 hefty men entered and scanned the entire restaurant. One left and then returned with 2 others, one dressed sharply and about Walter's age, and the other considerably older. Walter stood, embraced them both, and introduced me to his friend Tony and Tony's grandfather, Salvatore. These 2 were nothing like Walter. I've lived on Long Island my entire life, and these 2 seemed deeply connected. Later I questioned him about it, but he dismissed it, saying Tony was merely an old-school friend. They didn't linger long. The older man made a brief toast, and they celebrated our upcoming wedding. Tony gifted me exquisite diamond earrings worth about $10,000 as an early wedding present, and after a heartfelt embrace, they departed. No one from that evening attended the wedding, and I didn't see Tony for another 2 years. As they say, life proceeded with wedding preparations, moving, buying furniture, and decorating our home, and I entirely forgot about that dinner. Walter was diligent at work, though never overly ambitious. I often asked if he wanted to seek new clients or grow the business, but he was content with what we had. Money was never a concern. I didn't know the exact figures, but he never hesitated on any of my purchases. So you could say we settled into married life. Walter is sweet, kind, and gentle, but sometimes a woman craves more than just tenderness in the bedroom. I wasn't prepared to abandon my marriage to Walter yet, at least not until I understood his true financial standing, so I knew I needed to tread carefully, but I was craving something more intense. I didn't plan on any activities at home since the neighborhood was full of prying eyes and the evenings were my only free time. Thus I joined a gym, intending to maintain my fitness, but also enlisted a personal trainer. Christopher, partly Italian and towering at about 1.85 meters, was robust and intense. We started a covert relationship, meeting discreetly in hotel rooms multiple times a week for days filled with thrill and endurance. He delivered the intensity I was missing. So you had an affair? Did Walter ever find out? No, never, but it ended terribly and never occurred again. Strangely, Walter was away for work for a couple of days and a night, so Chris and I decided to book a hotel room for the night, a first for us, as we usually met only for short durations during the day. It was meant to be enjoyable for both of us. I can barely recall. But I believe we were drugged that evening. We ended up being dragged into a car and taken to a secluded warehouse where several burly men appeared. I knew Chris dealt in steroids or something similar, so I assumed it was related to that. And I was merely caught in the wrong place at the wrong time, but the situation looked grim. You mean you were kidnapped? What happened? And how did you manage to escape? Did Walter ever learn about this? Her voice became monotone as she recounted this part of the story, as if she had detached herself from the events. When the effects of the drugs wore off, I found myself bound to a chair with elastic bandages around my arms and legs to avoid leaving marks, and my mouth was taped shut. They were careful not to leave any physical evidence on me. Chris, however, was suspended by his wrists with a rope, his shirt torn around the handcuffs. They laid a large plastic sheet beneath him and began to beat him repeatedly with heavy chains. She paused for a moment and shuddered, then continued in the same steady voice. After some time, Chris stopped yelling. I think he mercifully passed out. The men left and returned with 2 large drums, placing my lover in one. I feared the second was for me, and then I lost consciousness. I sat silently, captivated. I had never encountered such tales before, and even in my darkest nightmares, I couldn't have imagined this. Eventually, I regained consciousness, still secured to the chair. There was another chair across from me, and sitting in it was Walter's friend, Tony. He instructed one of the men to remove the bandage from my mouth and one hand. I just sat there, petrified, and watched him. He pulled a flask from beneath his coat, poured a drink, and handed it to me. I took a sip and coughed slightly. It was potent, but I needed it. It was chilly in that place, and I was underdressed, but the alcohol helped warm me from the inside. Tony spoke in a calm, gentle voice. "Joanna, we need to have a conversation, and I want you to be completely honest with me. Can you do that for me, Joanna? If you can, soon we will move past what happened, and you can go home safely." I nodded silently. "Does Walter know about this man you're seeing?" "No, I don't think so. I've tried to ensure he never finds out. Is there any chance you could be pregnant by this man?" "No. I use birth control pills. I'm not ready to have children yet." "Does Walter know that you take birth control?" "No." "Do you love your husband, Joanna? Do you believe you can make him happy?" "Yes, I love him, and I am confident I can make him happy. I'm truly sorry this happened. I just needed." He raised his hand and stopped me. "I'm not sure if you're aware, but your husband is one of the most brilliant people I know. He could have been a remarkable writer and teacher if he had chosen that path. He is a master at laundering money and concealing it from the authorities. He maintains a small office and seems to have few clients. These clients include my family as well as some of our friends and business associates. We also utilize his services for a fee for several cartels operating within this country. But despite these skills, or perhaps because of them, Walter is quite an enigma. We understand this and just want to see him content. There are many who care about his happiness and are willing to go to great lengths, as you saw today, to ensure it happens. We think you can contribute to his happiness. I know I can make Walter happy because I truly love him. Let's not keep any secrets between us. I often talk to Walter, and he adores you immensely. He views you as his ideal wife and the mother of his future children. I wouldn't want him to be let down. We both realize that you married for money. But what you didn't know is that Walter possesses far more wealth than you could imagine. However, if you attempt to access it, too many people will be displeased and you won't be able to enjoy a single moment of it. Soon, my associates will escort you back to the car and ensure you get home safely. Walter doesn't need to know about this conversation. Wait a month as a guarantee, then stop taking your birth control pills and give Walter the children he desires. Can you do this for me? Yes, and I hope I never see you again, because if I do, you won't leave alive. There are countless ways you could meet your end, from a car accident to a robbery, and Walter will remain unaware of the true cause. Just remember, before that you will endure hell here. Never give me a reason to speak to you again, and never do anything that could make Walter unhappy." We both sat in silence for a while. I was too shocked to speak, and Joanna, perhaps too overwhelmed to continue. Then she concluded her story. "Walter never found out what happened. I never told him. Every day I strive to make him happy as if my life depends on it, because it really does. About a month later, I received a package in the mail containing the earrings you see me wearing and a note from Tony. I wear them daily as a reminder." She removed one earring and handed it to me. It was a flawless golden miniature of a 200-liter barrel. She now carries the weight of 2 empty barrels on her shoulders every day as a reminder of her obligations. Subscribe to our channel so your partner doesn't stray, and stay tuned for the next story, which is even more shocking than this one. If you're under 18, think twice before listening.